This podcast is brought to you by Reynolds & Reynolds, the industry leader in automotive technology. Learn how inadequate data may be impacting your used vehicle department at rayray.com/used cars. That's REYREY.com/used-cars.
Want to dive deeper into the topics you hear about on Daily Drive? We're offering listeners a special offer, 20% off a 1-year Automotive News digital subscription. That gets you access to all of our news, information, and analysis made for automotive industry leaders like you. Go to autonews.com/Daily Drive promo to redeem. Welcome to Daily Drive for Thursday, December 28th, 2023. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, it was a year of building hype for self-driving vehicles until it all came tumbling down.
Cruise fleet is idled in North America right now. They keep saying rebuild trust with their customers and regulators, and I think it's more build trust. I don't know that they ever really had that in the first place.
Automotive News Tech and Innovation Team Leader Pete Bigelow joins Jamie to talk about the biggest self-driving news in 2023 and what next year might bring for the AV industry.
Pete Bigelow, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thanks, Jamie. It's been a while. Good to be here today.
Absolutely. So this is our year in review discussion about automated vehicles, automated driving. And, you know, it's been a really interesting year. On the one hand, it feels like kind of a blah year, but it actually was a bit dramatic. I felt like we started with a sort of trough of despair, trough of disillusionment, and then a little bit of hype with Cruise. I certainly got excited by Kyle Vogt and his big plans to grow revenue and scale up the company. And then, boy, did they stub their toes, get out over their skis, whichever is the proper metaphor.
Right.
Where are we? I mean, Cruise seems like the story of the year in automated driving. And where does that stand now?
It is. It's I certainly think, to your point, if we're looking at this like in the focus of a year, we rode roller coaster up in the beginning of the year and we're riding it down right now. And it certainly stands in a place where the Cruise fleet is idled in North America right now after they got their driverless permits suspended in California back in October. After several weeks, they paused their fleet nationally as they've kind of regrouped in the face of a, significant safety incident. And right now they're making plans to, whenever operations restart, we don't know when that's going to be, but they're going to restart in one city as opposed to more than a dozen across the U.S. So to your point, I think that Cruise has, really got out too far over its skis and now is searching for what the right scope of operation is whenever it is, if they ever, come back.
Mm-hmm. But trying to start back at square one, not attempting a nationwide takeover all at once.
Definitely square one. We don't know where that's going to be, but right now they keep saying rebuild trust with their customers and regulators. And I think it's more build trust. I don't know that they ever really had that in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one aspect of what they're trying to do. I think there's some technical hurdles that are still being figured out. Clearly the biggest overstatement in autonomous driving over the last few years is that the technology is ready and it's just regulation holding it up. Clearly not the case. And this whole Cruise, fiasco puts an exclamation point on that.
Yeah. Although not all technology is created equal, there are some players who are still expanding very slowly and carefully. Waymo, I guess I think of as sort of the other big player, the biggest other player.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point that all these autonomous or automated technologies often get lumped together, and they're often conceptually very different. They have various levels of competence. And Waymo is the other big company out there, and they quietly, perhaps compared to everything going on with their competitor, Waymo started driverless commercial operations in San Francisco this year. The second city in which they're operating comes after Phoenix has been up and running for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have their sights on LA, down the road here, maybe at the end of 2024, but much more methodical approach. And I don't want to say they're perfect, but they're not having the frequency of problems as Cruise.
The clustering, the interference with municipal services kind of problems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've been perfect in that respect, but certainly not having the volume of complaints. And when they do have problems, I think that they're working with city officials in a sincere and earnest way to solve those issues when they do arise.
Definitely better relations.
I don't think there's any question about that at this point.
Yeah. What about, who are some of the other lesser known non-Google backed players out there in the space?
Well, it's a good question because we've kind of lost sight of some of them. But Zoox also quietly this year, not operating commercially, but they have a driverless deployment with a shuttle that's running between their offices in the Bay Area. So that's a big step for Zoox. And I think in retrospect, we can look at someone moving more slowly and say, oh, maybe that's not such a bad idea right now.
Right. Used to look like a bad strategy, and now it looks like a prudent one.
Yes, absolutely. Motional would be another one, the Hyundai Aptiv joint venture, making plans for a driverless commercial deployment in Las Vegas here in the early months of 2024, if I'm not mistaken. May Mobility here in Ann Arbor, also making plans for a driverless deployment in the near future. But again, we're talking maybe one or two routes, small scale, not boiling the entire country at a single time.
If Las Vegas during convention times, NADA, CES, what you name it, F1, if they could get better traffic flow through automation, I'm all for it.
Well, I mean, it's always ironic that going to Las Vegas for CES, which is my experience, you have all this transportation technology on the inside that's supposed to help make things safer, make things more efficient. And then the reality is right outside the convention center where it's a disaster and it takes 90 minutes just to move a few blocks across town. So yes, I think everybody would be in favor of that.
That would be good. All right. So we've also seen some developments in level 3. And level 3 is such a weird netherworld. I thought it had been banished forever, but level 3 is back and in some uses, again, in the Wild West of Nevada.
That is another development in the automated driving front this year that we've kind of lost sight of again with Cruise kind of sucking up all the oxygen in the room. But Mercedes-Benz has put level 3 automation in cars you can go buy, and it is able to be engaged and activated on certain stretches of road in Nevada at certain speeds. So
very limited application.
It is very limited in terms of geofence and when you can actually use it as a consumer. I think it really remains to be seen who wants to pay thousands of dollars for a system that has limited actual application right now. But again, it's kind of a foothold. We'll see how they, grow the geofence where it can be operated. What questions and complications arise perhaps, because I think those exist out there with level 3 as well.
Yeah. Well, there are some big spenders out in the Las Vegas area, or maybe great for a rental car. A high-end rental. Perhaps.
I think then you have run into, one of the big questions here is what sort of training do drivers need when they use a system like that?
Right.
Where conceptually, at least, they can turn their attention away from the road and read a book or watch Netflix, but you have to be able to retake control when the car asks you to. Boy, I don't know there's so many questions about that. If you're a car owner who understands how it works, to put it in a rental fleet would be perhaps a selling point, but maybe problematic from a safety perspective.
If it's not easy enough to use and to be explained in about a minute or two, I'm not sure it belongs in the car. Most systems are not that hard.
Well, that's true. I think one of the interesting things with the Mercedes-Benz deployment right now is that there remain a lot of questions about how this system works. It's called Drive Pilot. Whether you really can turn your attention away from the road and read a book or, probably more likely scroll through text on your phone. How much time you have to retake control when the car prompts you to, what are you criminally responsible for if there's a crash? Mercedes says they'll take some product liability here, but there's a whole nother aspect and dimension of the law that they cannot account for. So, be careful out there using the system if you're going to use it, I guess is, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my legal advice, but proceed cautiously.
That sounds prudent. That makes sense. So I think related to that, we're seeing the continued shakeout in the LiDAR sector. It's been, we've seen some players make some progress, announce some deals, some real production plans, but it's also been still tough sledding.
Absolutely. I think if you look at the stock price of any public LiDAR company right now, they've had a very rough year. There's been some consolidation. Anecdotally, heading into CES, I historically have, a few dozen pitches from LiDAR or sensor companies, and it's definitely, I can count the number on one hand so far this year, and I think that's indicative of where the industry's at. And there's a question of, the key question is, as LiDAR gets set for driver assist applications, is how much better is it making a driver assist product? How much more are customers willing to pay for that, overall technology suite?
Well, and it is it's always a constant cost benefit analysis, but we're also seeing some companies, as they gain scale, be able to project really bringing some costs down. I mean, it's one thing when the sensor itself, the LiDAR, is 4 digits, and then when it can, potentially get down to $500, $200, $100.
Yeah, and that's definitely the direction that the unit plus software is heading right now, if not already there. And I think there's no question that redundancy in the sensor suite makes these systems better. So I do expect that we'll see a handful of long-term survivors. I don't know if I'll use the word winner just yet in light of where the stock prices are, but I certainly think that there are companies that are going to make it over the long haul. And I think of Luminar certainly has a lot of contracts with major OEMs. They're going to be in the EX90 that has made its debut, and I think still set for commercial production early in 2024. So I think that's not a mass market vehicle, but we're starting to see it at the luxury level, and we'll see that trickle down effect soon.
Coming up, Jamie and Pete talk about Tesla's driver assistance features and about what's to come for the self-driving industry in 2024. That's next on Daily Drive.
The auto industry's shift to carbon neutrality is here and it's accelerating. But is it enough?
This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities.
No more hesitancy, no more excuses, no more waiting for the others to move first. There is simply no more time for that.
Driving to Zero is a new podcast series from Automotive News that looks at the auto industry's roadmap to carbon neutrality. We take a big picture look at the environmental, political, and social trends pushing the move toward a greener future. And we pull back the curtain on how these decisions are being made at the highest levels.
I said, the headline that you need is GM believes in an all-electric future. And I think Dan Ammon and Mary Barra pretty much said the same thing, which is like, but we don't.
Spoiler alert, they came around to that idea. Find out how and much more. I'm Jake Neer. Join me and Automotive News Executive Editor Jamie Butters on Driving to Zero, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Lack of inventory, increased auction fees, and a volatile market means stocking your lot can be challenging these days. To be successful, you have to move fast. You need to make decisions quickly at auction. You need to inspect trade-ins and decide on an offer that will benefit you without slowing down the sales process. You need to appraise and price vehicles with the most up-to-date information possible in a market that can change quickly. But the data you rely on to make these decisions could be holding you back. How often do you find yourself manually filtering through comps because there are outliers that don't match the vehicle you're appraising? When unexpected mechanical issues come up, how much time do you have to spend looking back through comps to reprice the vehicle and determine if the reconditioning costs are worth it? How long do you spend searching through individual auction and third-party websites for the inventory you need? These problems affect the entire used vehicle process, from acquisition to appraisal to merchandising. Visit rayray.com/used cars to explore how old and irrelevant vehicle information may be holding you back and discover how to make improvements for faster, more accurate, and more profitable decisions. That's rey.com/used-cars.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. I'm talking with Automotive News Tech and Innovation team leader Pete Bigelow about the biggest autonomous driving stories in 2023. As we take ourselves through the scale of automated driving capabilities from the Waymos through the level 3s, where are we with Tesla? Where is Tesla with their autopilot and their quote unquote full self-driving? Has to have the capital letters because it's only a proper noun, not an actual descriptive noun.
Right. Definitely, keep that in quotation marks for full self-driving, which is a driver assist system that requires human oversight at all times. And I think that's, in a way, like there's probably been not a lot of movement in 2023 on the quote unquote full self-driving or autopilot fronts, in that they're both seeing a lot of problems out there. We just had another autopilot crash the other day that involved, no surprise here, a vehicle with autopilot activated running into a fire truck that was stopped on a major highway. And, we've seen this accident before. Why does it continue?
Well, it seems like, the big developments for Tesla and automated driving this year has been in court. They've won some cases. They've won some defenses, maybe some cases that were brought against them that weren't ideally formed for winning, but definitely some others that are continuing to churn along.
Yeah, not the ideal test cases, I guess, if coming from a consumer safety perspective. And we saw a driver, I think back in June or July, who was, pled guilty to, if I remember, it was vehicular manslaughter, or I may not have the exact charge right, but ultimately in the early going here between that case and the case involving the Uber self-driving test driver, which finally settled this year, you're seeing human drivers, at least in a token way, held responsible for providing the oversight that they're, according to the owner's manual, supposed to be providing when using a driver assist system.
And then we'll see where that line gets drawn for the level 3s.
That's right. Ultimately, it's the courts who are deciding like what drivers should or should not be doing and holding them responsible. It's not at all proactive from the OEMs or tier one supplying these systems. It's ultimately this big gray area that is going to be decided in the courts.
Well, is there anything happening in the Congress, that will set the ground rules for what automated systems can and can't, or should or shouldn't do, what the owner or the driver or the manufacturer's responsibilities are?
Heading into 2024, I'd say, well, maybe don't get your hopes up. There is some talk once again of reviving legislation that would kind of set a national framework for autonomous vehicles on the road. I don't know that it's, even if it was to pass, if it's going to get into, what drivers should or should not be doing behind the wheel at the lower levels of autonomy. I think that's ultimately something that NHTSA would set rules for. And we're seeing zero appetite from NHTSA right now to wade into that thicket.
Any other predictions for the year ahead? What kind of growth should we expect to see? Are there any new players? Does it feel like a winnowing time?
It's the last 2 years we've seen Argo in 2022 close in October of 22. We've seen Cruise kind of implode here in the fall. And I don't know that I think the best case for the autonomous vehicle industry would be like a year of very slow and steady growth with no, if nothing bad happens, that's a good year right now.
Right. So, when Cruise was planning their big expansion, it really looked like we would see this across most of the Sun Belt by the end of the decade. Is that, where do we look for, not necessarily snow and ice, New York City in a superstorm, but when can we maybe reasonably expect? We think in 2030? Is it 2040?
I guess it depends, Jamie. It depends if you're talking in a widespread, meaningful way. We're probably at least at 2030 right now, into the 2030s across the Sun Belt, I think is the ideal location where these will roll out. Atlanta, Miami. Look at all the places Cruise wanted to operate: Dallas, Houston, Austin. I think it's going to be smaller right now. And I think Austin's kind of the next place where Waymo and Cruise were going to operate. And the VW unit that kind of quietly set up shop this year, which we forgot to mention, they're looking at Austin. So if there's a hot spot, it's Austin and maybe Texas overall, because there's also a lot of autonomous trucking operations that are, geographically located in Texas right now. Aurora plans to start its driverless commercial operations by the end of 2024. That's maybe another thing we can look to here in the year ahead.
Well, that has been, we started the year in this sort of trough of disillusionment, at least for the robotaxi side, but the emphasis was really on the trucking and the opportunities for long haul drives where the driving is quote unquote simpler. It can be hub to hub. It can be overnight.
I think trucking certainly has the right economic model for automation to work on the road. When you're replacing a human driver, when you're opening up the possibility of operating 24/7, maybe getting around those hours of service, this seems to be the place to make some money soon. Whereas if I'm a passenger in a robotaxi, do I care if my driver is human or automated? I just want to get where I'm going. But on the trucking side, if there's money to be saved, and I think there is, boy, if you have automated driving and I don't in my fleet, it's an immediate disadvantage too. So I think trucking has the right business model for automation. And I certainly see, the way you look at the way Chris Urmson pivoted from Waymo to Aurora, you look at the way that Brian Selesky's now pivoted from Argo to Stack, which is his new autonomous trucking company. You take two of the most prominent guys from the robotaxi side and see the moves that they've made. I think that speaks to the opportunity in trucking. But I think like we saw with Cruise having one big incident, I think that spotlight will just be magnified if there's a truck responsible for a crash on a public road. That the industry right now feels very precarious and fragile.
Well, we'll be watching how it develops through 2024 and beyond with you and your team. Pete Bigelow, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News coordinating producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on autonomous driving, tech and innovation, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for a look at the biggest stories of 2023 in the auto retail world.
Dealers they're still making a lot of money. They're still probably making more than they were making in 2019. But because those COVID years were so strong for them, I think that they're starting to see just a little bit of a trickle down in terms of a little less money that's coming in.
If you enjoy the podcast, remember to leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.